All right, so we're really nearly there. This is our last video on creating Uber. And what we're really after then is this behavior here. So we want the user or the rider to, when they've requested and had their request accepted, to be able to see the driver's location. So that's this one here, driver location, and also to see the distance that the driver is away. So you're going to need to do a few things to set that up. The first is to actually store the driver's location on Parse, which we weren't previously doing. I've stored it here in the location column there in the user class. And then once you've done that, it's a relatively simple matter of checking to see whether that exists and checking to see whether the driver username exists on the request to show the appropriate information to the user here. And you'll notice that if I move this around, it pings back quite quickly here. That's because every 5 seconds I'm updating the information so that the user can actually see the driver coming closer and closer. All right, so that's what we're after. There's a few challenges in there, as always. You should be able to do a fair portion of it yourself. So best of luck. Hope it goes well. All right, so here we go. Now the first thing we need to do if we want to be able to show the driver's location to the rider is actually store the driver's location on Parse, which we're not currently doing. So at the moment, we store the rider's location in the requests class. Down here, the requester location, but not the driver location. Now, we could definitely store the driver's location in the request class, but there's no other information here that the requester actually needs. So what I'm going to do is store it in the user class instead. And that means that we can get all the information about the user, about the driver that is, in one query rather than two. It also makes it more straightforward to save the driver's location when they might be switching between different requests. So I think it makes a bit more sense as well to store the driver's location in the user class. So we can do that over here in view requests. You may or may not remember that we've got our update location class here, which currently we use to get a refreshed list of rider requests for the driver. But we can also use that to store the driver's location using, in fact, we've got a Parse GeoPoint user location that we can save directly. So that's nice and easy. We just need to get the current user, which we do using parseuser.get current user, and then we want to put a new variable, which I'll call just location, and that's going to be equal to user location. And then that will save the driver's location in the user class. And then we just save that. Oops, we have to get the right thing first. Okay, current user and save in background. We don't need a callback or anything here. We don't need to know that that's happened. We just want it to happen in the background. Okay, so let's just run that and make sure that we get something over on Parse. Our next steps will then be working in the your location activity to show the driver's location to the user. So let's have a look. All right, so that's now loaded the single request that's waiting. If we then refresh the Parse data browser, with any luck, we'll have a location column now. And for our driver, that will then be updated with their location. There it is. Fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to have the driver location set up regularly. And what I'll also do is remove this on pause instruction to stop updating the location. And that will mean that even when the driver goes on to the Google Maps app for directions, it will still be updating the location in Parse. All right, so that's all good. Now we need to go back over to your location and start working on the rider activity. But just before we do that, I'm going to update our app so that we're now a rider rather than a driver. and I'll do that on pass as well. So we'll make our active user a rider, and I'm also going to make Rob a driver. So Rob is going to be the driver attached to our request, and I'm going to give Rob a location as well. There we go. So Rob is now the driver, we're the rider, and I'm also going to update the requests manually so that the active request that we're working with has a requester username of our current username, which is this one, this long one here, and a driver username of Rob, so that we can work with a real request, even though we've made it up. So I'm just going to use this request here. So I'll put the request username, instead of Ralphie, it's our active user. The driver username is Rob. And I've already got a requester location here, which is pretty much 10.1, 10.1. Depending on how you've been playing around with the app, you may or may not have that. So you may need to update that to something as well. Okay, so now we've got our requester username and our driver username. So we've got an active request to work with. So now let's go back to Android Studio just to make sure that that's run. Excellent, that's great. So now we can get rid of this line, which makes our user a rider, because they're going to be a rider from now on anyway. Okay, so let's have a think about what order we're going to set up everything in here. I think the first thing that we need to do is a check to see whether there's an active request going when the user starts the app. Because they could well request an Uber and then close down the app and load it up again, and at the moment it wouldn't pick that up at all. So I'm going to add some code for that in your location, and I'm actually going to do it in the, if I can find it, the update location method. So this is called at the very beginning of when we open the app or open this activity. It's also recalled whenever the user's location is updated. So this is a great place to check to see whether the user has an active request or not. So first off, let's check to see if request active is false, because we only want to check if there's a request active if we don't think that there is one at the moment. So let's go and do a check to see if we've got an active request. So we're doing a request over pass objects. We'll call it query as usual. And it's going to be a pass query.getQuery, and we're querying requests. And we want to check where the requester username is equal to our current username. So pass user.get current user.get username. And if that's the case, then, well, actually, either way, we want to find it in the background using a new find callback. And then we'll do our usual check to see if we've got no exceptions, and if objects.size is greater than 0. And if it is, then we want to loop through it. So for objects, which is going to be a pass object, and we're looping through objects. So again, we're only expecting one, but we'll loop through them anyway. So if we've got one, we definitely want to now set request active to be true. We also want to test to see if there's a driver active here, because if we've got a driver username, that means that someone's on our way, and we need to know that that's the case. So let's check to see if driver username So object.get and driver username. So if that is not null, then we need a way to store that. So I'm going to create a driver username, or create it here, string, which is initially going to be empty. Where are we? There we go. So now we're going to update the driver username to object.getString driver username. Okay, so now we've done a check to see, one, if there's a request active, and two, to see if it's got a driver username. Now, I think we've written quite a bit of code there, so I'm just going to do a quick log just to make sure that that's working. App info, and let's have driver username. So with any luck, this is going to, now when we run it, pick up the request here that we created manually and return the driver username of Rob. So let's have a look. And there we go. Rob has been returned. Fantastic. So it's picked up that there is a request active. Now, one other thing we want to do there then is update the info label here to say that there's a driver on their way. So I'm going to have just a generic option initially. Now, info text view is what we use there. .set text. So at the moment, if we don't have a driver username, then we know that there's a request been put in place. No driver has picked it up yet. So I'm going to put waiting for driver. Okay. We also want to run the code that we had before. Here we go. Oh, we used finding Uber driver before. So actually, let's use that. Doesn't really matter. So finding Uber driver. And we also want to set the request Uber button to cancel Uber. There we go. Now, if we've got a driver username, that means we can update the info text view to something like your driver is on the way. Maybe on their way makes a bit more sense. And I'm also going to remove the button entirely because I don't want them to be able to cancel their Uber if the driver's already accepted it. You could obviously change your code to do that and send the driver a message when the user cancels it, but that's rather beyond what we're doing here and is just quite complicated, not particularly interesting. I'm just going to remove the possibility of the user cancelling the Uber for now. So I think that was request Uber button dot set visibility, and we'll set it to invisible. Okay, so let's just check that that's all working. There are two more things we want to do after that, and one is to display where the driver is alongside the user, and the other is to display how far away the driver is so that they've got a sense of how long it's going to take. Both of those require getting the driver's location, so we'll do that once we've checked that this is working okay. There we go. So we've got the drivers on the way and the request or cancel Uber button has been removed. Wonderful. So let's have a look now at the code that we've got here. Now this code, remember, just updates the requester location on pass, which we do want to do, and that's fine. So we can leave that code there. But this time we want to have another option, which is not only is the request active, but do we have a driver username as well? So let's do a check to see if driver username, and we want is not equal to nothing. So we do that with a exclamation mark and then dot equals. And here what I want to do is update the driver's location and put it on the map. So we're going to need to get the driver's location. So actually going to need to get the driver's location either way. We want to check whether it's been updated. We're going to be running this again and again while the user's watching the map, waiting for their driver to arrive. So we're going to want to get the driver's location either way. So remember that driver's location is stored over in the user class, and that's down here right there. So let's do a query. So we're doing a user query. So we get pass query on pass user this time. And I'll call this a user query. And remember we use pass user dot get query. So it works very slightly differently to object queries. And then we want to do a user query where the username is equal to our driver username. So that's the driver that's answered our request, and that's the location that we want to get. So as usual, let's take our user query and find it in the background with a new find callback, and then all our usual code. If there's no exceptions, and if objects.size is greater than 0. So again, we're only expecting 1, but we'll loop through it anyway. This is going to be a pass user, and I'm going to call it driver. And we're looping through objects. What we really want to know about this driver is his location there. So I'm going to want to save that location. So I'm going to create a pass geopoint driver location, which is initially a new pass geopoint, and we'll create it just with 0, 0. Okay. And then here we want to update driver location to be driver.get pass geopoint, and then the one that we want is location, remember, over here. Okay, so now we've got our driver's location. There's a small chance, of course, that that might fail. We might have had a problem getting the driver's location for some reason, and we don't want to start showing the driver's location inaccurately. So let's do a check to see if driver location.get latitude is not equal to 0, then we know we've got a proper driver location. We might want to be very sure and make sure that the driver location.get longitude is not 0 as well. We know that this particular location is in the middle of the ocean, so I'm not too worried about getting an erroneous false negative there if the driver happens to have a location of precisely 0, 0. So once again, we've written quite a lot of code there. So I'm just going to log app info, and we'll log driver location .toString. Oops, I could do with that being a capital L. Okay, so let's just run that and make sure that we're getting a driver location. And if we are, our next step is going to be to work out the distance between our current user and the driver, and then display that on this info text view at the bottom of the screen. Just before we run that though, let's have a quick think about the order that this is going to be run in. And remember, driver username is not going to be updated until this pass query has been called. And so it's likely that this code is actually going to be run before that's completed, which means driver username will be empty and none of this code will be run. So the way I'm going to get around that is actually setting up something that I want to have anyway, which is for this to update itself every 5 seconds, regardless of what the status is. So I want it to go online and check to find out what the driver's location is, whether there's an active request, etc. regularly, even when, as far as the app knows, no request has been put in place. And that will then save this problem because we'll get it the second time even if we don't get it the first. So the simplest way to do that is to just put some code in at the end of the method to update the location to run that method again in 5 seconds time. And you may or may not remember how to do that. We start by creating a handler, which I'll create up here so we can access it from anywhere. So this is just a handler, which we'll call handler, which is a new handler. And we definitely want the Android version of the handler class. And then on our handler, we put a runnable and instruct it to run in 5 seconds. I think I might make it 2 seconds here just to make my life a little bit easier. But 5 seconds is probably reasonable for a real live app. Obviously, the lower number, the more updates they get, or the quicker updates they get, but also the quicker it's going to use up their battery, and the quicker you'll likely hit your path limits as well. So, take our handler and we post delayed, and then we have a runnable, which is basically just a method that we want to run, and we have a time in milliseconds after which we want that to run. So let's create a new runnable. And the runnable, all we want to do is update location. And I'll use location here. Obviously, if the user changes their location, then it will be run as well. But that's good. We only really need this if the user is not updating their location, which might be the case if they're waiting for an Uber. So as I said, I'll run it every 2000 milliseconds or every 2 seconds for now. Okay, so now we should find that this bit of code that we wrote before to log the driver's location should return something, and in fact it will return something every 2 seconds. But in fact no, it won't, because somehow I got the wrong auto predict and I got post on time rather than post delayed. So rather than specifying a delayed time, I would have had to specify a particular time. We could have done it that way, but I definitely meant to have post delayed there. So let's try that again. And sadly we're not quite done yet because I've actually put that in the wrong place. Easily done. Maybe some of you noticed that I've done it. I want it to appear right at the end of that method so it runs regardless of the state of the app. If where I'd put it was just inside the first if statement here. So if request active was equal to false. Oh no, that one closes. It was inside request active being true, which wasn't the case initially. So therefore it wasn't called the first time. And therefore we didn't get this repeating every 2 seconds. So fingers crossed, should get it now. And there we go. Can you see it? We're now getting this pass geo point regularly. Fantastic. So I'm very happy with that. I'm actually going to leave it at 2 seconds for testing purposes. So now we just need to make 2 additions here. And the first is to show how far away the driver is. Now we've got some code for that because we worked that out over in view requests, Where was it? Here we go, because we wanted to work out how far away the requests were from our driver. So the 3 lines of code that we used are there. So I'm going to copy them over to your location. And first off, we need to get the difference or the distance between the driver location and the current location. So let's put driver location first off. Now this is all fine, but the user's location isn't in the format of a parse geopoint. It's in the format of a location. So we need to just convert that, which I'll do by creating a new parse geopoint. And we do that by specifying a latitude and longitude, which we can get from the user's location. So location.getLatitude and location.getLongitude. There we go. So that should give us the distance from the driver's location to our user's location, then round it to 1 decimal place. And we actually now want to update the info text view. So that's here. I might as well copy that code down. So we want to update info text view, and we'll have your driver is, and then it'll be so many miles away. And the distance, of course, is this one. So distance to 1 decimal place and to string. All right, let's take a look. And if that's all working, there's one thing left that we need, which is to display both the driver and the user on the map, for which we have some code because we showed the driver and the user on the map in view rider location. So that shouldn't be too tricky. And we should be able to get it up and running fairly quickly. And there we go. Your driver is 9.7 miles away. Fantastic. So this is looking great. All I want to do now is copy over this code to update our Google map. Here we go. So remember, we had to have this in the add on global layout listener there. We don't need that this time because we're running it every 2 seconds anyway. So it will run after the map has been fully laid out. So let's put our code in here. Yep, we'll update all of those classes as well. And let's just run through and see what we need to change. So we need a builder just like before. We need markers just like before. And we're going to have 2 markers. We want the blue one this time to be the driver location, because the rider is going to be used to seeing their own location in red. So we want to have the driver location in blue. And so we're going to get that from a lat lung, and we're not getting the location from an intent anymore. We're getting it from driver location.get latitude. And then same for get longitude. And I do like that it predicts, once you've got the latitude, it then predicts that you're going to want the longitude next. That makes me happy. All right, so that should display the driver's latitude, or driver's location. And now to display the user's location, we just use location.get latitude and location.get longitude. Okay, and that's your location, which is what we want still. And then that should update the markers, update the bounds. Yep, all of that we can leave the same. Just one thought. Are we clearing the map before we do all of this? I don't think we are. So let's do that right at the beginning, because we want to clear it regardless every time we do a refresh. And also, this map animation and marker, this is just updating if we want to show the user's location in the center of the screen. We only want to do that if there's no driver username active. So I'm just going to put a little if statement around that to see if driver username is empty, and if so, do that, which is the old animation. Well, not old, we're still going to use it, but only when there's no driver response. Okay, so now it may take 2 seconds, but it should update and show us the driver's distance away and show us both driver and user locations. And there we go. So we've now got both the user, and you see it redirects back every 2 seconds there, and the driver, which is another reason why we may want only every 5 seconds to update that view. So I'll just update that in the code. But now the app does everything that we want. So the user can request an Uber, and they can cancel that request as well. And then the drivers can view local requests, see where they are and how far away they are, and then accept them and get directions through Google Maps. And then once that's happened, the rider can see in a regularly updated view how far the driver is away and where exactly they are, so that they can see which way they're coming, etc. So that takes us to the end of our Uber app. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you managed to do a good portion yourself. As always, give yourself a bit of congratulations, cup of tea, biscuit, whatever it is. And then we're going to move on to something fairly different. We're going to see how to make a game using GDX, and the game that we're going to make is Flappy Bird. So that should be a lot of fun. I'll see you in the next section.